Hello there, and welcome to today's webcast, Cloud Safe, Securing the New Hybrid IT Landscape. I am Otto Dahl, a Senior Fellow with the Center for Digital Government, and I'm excited to serve as host for today's session. Thanks for joining us. I know we're going to have a great time over the next 30 minutes. We have a few housekeeping notes for you on the screen. Also, during today's webcast, you'll be able to connect with your peers via Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. For those of you on Twitter, please use hashtag GovTechLive to share key takeaways, quotes, and learnings from today's webcast. Joining me today to discuss this important topic are E.J. Windun, who's the Chief Technology Officer for Oakland County, Michigan. Drew Kaiser, the Solutions Architect, specializing in the Cisco platforms from Tech Data. And Brian Schoepfle, Senior Partner Solutions Architect with AWS Worldwide Public Sector. You know, our purpose today is to give some advice about what I feel are some of the realities that we face today. The first and probably foremost is the fact that the threat landscape that exists today is varied and it's very persistent. We also see that leadership's, if you will, risk tolerance is actually going down. I think we all have stories of in the past where people might have talked a good game about cybersecurity, but didn't necessarily put the sufficient resources, both in people and money, into the issue. And we're seeing much more awareness of the risks that cybersecurity challenges present. And so we're seeing a lot more money and a lot more resources in the way of people, processes, et cetera, put into it. And so therefore jurisdictions are really looking at how to create structure, how to create processes, as well as building a support team to, in essence, meet these needs. And so today, that's what we're going to be talking about in a panel discussion, or I like to view it as a opportunity to just chat around the table about these challenges. And so again, gentlemen, I thank you for appearing today. With your collective expertise, I know we're going to have a good session. So I'd like to start things off by always sort of embracing or defining what the challenges, what the problems seem to be. And so, EJ, I'm going to start with you first. And I'd like for people to understand through your experiences, you know, what do you feel are the causes of cloud breaches that you guys in Oakland County prepare for?
Thanks, Otto, and it's a pleasure to be here and to be chatting with the panel and to see what other people have questions about. From my perspective, cloud breaches aren't that different than the breaches I'd face on-prem. They come from the same root cause, which is human error. That human error comes from leaked credentials. It comes from insufficient identity. It could come from software vulnerabilities or unpatched software, configuration errors. There's malicious insiders, but it always comes, there was a person underneath it that either with the intent or without the intent did something in error that created a situation. And to me, that's the key to understanding what this is. We're still trying to solve the same issue across the security landscape and protecting ourselves and helping people protect themselves, help those people to protect themselves and what that is.
Yeah, and you know, I think that governments, obviously, we've had to deal with this Because of the acceleration of the use of cloud technology, it's all the more important that we address this when we make use of cloud technologies. And so, let's get an industry perspective. I mean, Drew and Brian, you guys are in the industry and have that perspective from your vantage point. And I'm interested in, and I'll start with Brian. What are some of the things that you're seeing state and local governments having challenges with? I am sure that AWS has to, work with customers to address any concerns that they may have with cloud security. And so what do you see from your vantage point?
Yeah, thanks. It's true that governments everywhere, state, local, even at the national level, want to accelerate their digital transformation because they want to offer easier access to online citizen services or just be able to earn trust with more effective solutions with their constituents. And that's going to include things like being able to send notifications to users, providing a single login for government services like DMV, or publishing public health information, in the wake of what we've all just been through in the past 18 months. But I do think that some customers are kind of under the mistaken impression that innovation and security are at odds with each other. And what a lot of state, local governments, and higher education customers in particular that I have seen run into is really not that much different from private enterprises, where you'll have a few teams who begin experimenting with cloud in ways that are isolated from each other. And before you know it, you have a bunch of disparate production systems with no centralized monitoring, no observability, and no control. So with AWS Control Tower, you're really flipping the script on that. With AWS Control Tower, customers can bring all those accounts under management and use things like service control policies, which function as guardrails throughout the rest of the organization, which allow customers to set baseline standards and make sure that those standards are uniformly enforced. And in this way, we're giving developers the freedom they need without sacrificing the security standards that have been set by the organization.
Drew, your thoughts?
Well, thanks for having me, Otto. And I agree with Brian. I think there's a lot of challenges that are facing state, municipalities, local government, education, all across the country. Ransomware is just the start of it, but a lot of it is going back to EJ's point around securing the users and securing even public clouds that they may be adopting. I know Cisco has a product called CloudLock that helps with securing those public clouds via API and plugging in and controlling files inside the cloud, which is usually that shadow IT or area where modern IT doesn't have visibility into. So new products like that are helping and securing clouds everywhere.
Yeah, good points. Want to remind the audience that we're going to continue to discuss the topic, but we really like the audience to help direct some of our discussion. So when you come up with your questions, please submit those through the Q&A box that's in the lower left of your screen, and I will look to weave your questions that you need answered into our discussion. All right. Let's talk about what people should be doing if they're new to this, if they're going to, if you will, start addressing cloud security. And in particular, EJ, what advice would you have for folks that are, for the first time, creating a security or a secure cloud environment?
It's a great question, and I would tell you the key to this is to start with a strategy. Understand what you intend to do and what you're going to be about. So in Oakland County, our journey with cloud started with software as a service, and we moved public websites out there. So the data classification for us was public data, easily accessible, didn't require as much security as we started looking at other things, and we're like, well, We'd like to have a more dynamic, fluid environment, avoiding some of the costs of that bubble of how you maintain systems. So having two versions of an app because we don't do an in-place upgrade. So we wanted to use that elasticity of cloud to create the spin up, spin down of what things are. So all of a sudden we started moving different workloads to the cloud. And that changes the way you have that philosophy. And so 4 tenets that we kind of built this off of when you think of the strategy that Oakland County deployed was, one is you have to understand what the risks are that you face. So what does it mean if that were to have been breached, and what is the potential impact to your agency or your government entity when you do this? We then also designed from the inside out. We said it's not good enough anymore with the threat vectors we kind of talked about earlier to just have that hard outer shell. And we protected it from the inside and then put the layers from that side going out in a series of structures that protect it. The next thing that we thought was imperative is least privilege. We want to make sure you have the right access to do the job, nothing more, nothing less. And having risk-based authentication in that is critical. The more you know about the person, the interaction, the sensitivity of that data allows you to put more controls around what you're going to do. The other thing I would say is to log and inspect everything. An IDS and a SIM will be your best friends as you do this. And the more you can capture, the more you can see the complexity of the threat vectors that we're talking about. Those tools become essential to knowing what you have to protect against. And so those are the 4 basic pillars that we kind of built from when we thought about securing that framework. And that's kind of where that journey started. And we've now moved to the spot where I have 4 data classifications inside Oakland County. I have a restricted classification, which is things like criminal justice. It's the most restricted thing that I actually face. And I use GovCloud for that instance. But as I move to confidential, internal use, or even public data, I use a public cloud for all of that information and build security layers around that. And we do that to maintain the cost structure of what it takes to do that as well. Because we have a fiduciary responsibility as a government to give our taxpayers the best value. And so knowing what you have to protect and the value of it and how to effectively do that from a cost perspective is essential. The other thing that might be helpful for people to think about with this is if you get governed by some sort of policy, you start with what is the compliance or regulatory requirements you face, and start with that picture first. Understand what that means. The next thing you'd want to do is classify your data. And there's a lot of ways to go about classifying data. We can spend a lot of different time slicing that, but you need to classify that data and understand what that exposure means to you. I mentioned the risk-based identity, and then you will audit what that is, and you'll have to repeat this every so often because those rules change all the time. And so that's a little bit of an insight into how we've done it at Oakland County.
You know, are there other processes, because sort of the other side of this coin is it's an ongoing challenge, right? So it's an ongoing affair that we have to do. So EJ, you know, are there other processes that you incorporate in Oakland County that keeps sort of the cycle of security going in the cloud arena over time?
So we actually get audited by a number of different agencies on a routine basis. And we look at that on a continuous basis. So there's almost like a continuous audit process for us. As a new rule comes out or something changes, we repeat the same cycle of looking at the compliance requirements, looking at that data classification, looking at the authentication, putting ourselves through our own internal audit. Another thing we do at the county is we do pen tests of every application when a major change is made, trying to make sure that it's protected before it goes out into production. And it's just part of your business cadence. And one of the things we've tied our cloud processes into, or even any build process, is our design review process. Every organization probably has some form of a gate process where you look at a design, you look at what your standards are, you look at how it's deployed. We've tried to attach those security pieces along with technical standards into those reviews to ensure we're aligning to those items. And it looks at how we save money from cost, but it also makes sure that we've got the right security tools in place to meet the needs of the citizens and keep that identity and information protected.
Cool, cool. You know, there's also the challenge that people need technical folks to make all this happen. So, EJ, what advice do you have for folks for putting together a really great team that can deal with the complexities, because there are a lot of complexities in the cloud world, to ensure that we stay safe?
That is such a loaded question, Otto. I appreciate you actually asking that question, but it's not always the most graceful thing when you start on a cloud journey of what you're going to do. And for us, it started with figuring out how we were going to begin that process of building cloud, especially that infrastructure when I use it as a data center. I have an on-prem data center, I have practices. My cloud practices are dynamically different. And the way we went about doing this is we built a core team of people that focused on the delivery of a pilot of cloud things for that data center. So we built the structures of that cloud data center using those framework things I talked about, building from the inside out. We perfected what that was, did our pen test, but we took a group of people from within the organization. So we had people from architecture and strategy, working with someone from network, someone from our server team, and a security team member. And that sort of nucleus of a group is how we started building that practice out to ensure that all those needs of those different architecture threads get met as we go forward. And so from that point, it continues to morph. But another key point is, how do you make that entry into cloud? And for those of us in the government space, sometimes it's a little hard. So in our case, we actually went through a third-party intermediary, and our partner in this is Strategic Communications. So they're my intermediary to AWS. So I don't deal directly with AWS, I deal with Strategic, and that also helps me with some of the licensing things I need to do as well, because they serve as my licensing agent partner for all the different tools and things I have to do as a government agency. So instead of needing to have 16 contracts for the tools I may run in my cloud, I have one with Strategic. Strategic then assumes the risk and liability that goes with that for me. But it's how you sort of make those steps and start learning what you're going to do. And from there, it kind of grows organically, Otto. And then now we're at the point of figuring out what's the next generation of this look like. We run about 20% of our footprint in Oakland County in the cloud today over our last 2-3 year journey of this. So that's what we're looking at now.
Great advice. Brian, along these same lines, what do you see your customers doing to remediate the cybersecurity challenges that they face?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sitting here absorbing just everything that EJ has said, and I think it's really important. One of the concepts that he was describing, and thank you for this, but didn't really name by name, is something that we really encourage our customers who are beginning their cloud journey to focus on constructing internally, and that is what we call a cloud center of excellence. Now, that can go by a bunch of different names. You can call that a cloud tiger team. You can call that whatever you want. But this is a collection of individuals who are really focused on what projects can be piloted in the cloud, what security and compliance standards need to be met as we go through this. What are the other high availability and resilience requirements that different application stacks or IT operating environments have. And the center of excellence is really a key factor for success for a lot of our customers. And when it comes to security in particular, I actually grew up in Oakland County. I live in Scottsdale, Arizona now, but my mom still lives in Oakland County. I'm a graduate of Michigan State University. But growing up in southeastern Michigan, I've been on the automotive factory floors a number of times, and you walk through that floor and you see all the signs on the wall that all say, safety is everyone's job, and in the IT world, security is everyone's job. So I think a lot of people in the organization need to be informed. Everything from network and application, even developers and architects, but down to the end user, to be educated on being able to identify phishing attempts, where and when they should use their credentials, where and when they should present sensitive information. AWS offers a number of different services that can help support these efforts. EJ mentioned that he's running his criminal justice or CJIS compliance system inside of GovCloud. AWS has 124 fully featured services that are authorized or in review for FedRAMP moderate, and 106 that are approved or in review for FedRAMP high baseline. And I could list a ton of these services that are supporting our government customers on their most secure workloads, but it's really about being able to offload the undifferentiated heavy lifting and automate that which can be automated into the cloud. Which will help you, reduce alert fatigue and allow you to focus your manual effort on those things that matter the most.
Yeah, I'd like to interject a question from the audience here because I think it's a good one. The question is, considering the current landscape of cyber attacks, they're curious about the security of this data storage. So who'd like to tackle that one first?
Are we talking about the security of the cloud in particular?
I would assume so, because obviously we've distributed our data, not just our applications, right, in these cloud structures. So.
Yep. So the AWS cloud is secure by default. Your data is encrypted at rest. Your data is encrypted in flight. And you can enable a number of different services that will allow you to not only control, as EJ was referring to, the role-based access control to this data, the principle of least privilege. If you don't need this data, there's no reason that you should access it. But also the services that we have, such as CloudTrail and CloudWatch, which will help you with observability. EJ mentioned integrating these things with a SIM system. You have when you think about how AWS approaches security, which is with the shared security model, I think hopefully a lot of people on the call are already responsible or already aware of this, but this is where AWS is responsible for the security of the cloud, where you as the customer are responsible for your security in the cloud. You've offloaded a lot of, again, that undifferentiated heavy lifting that goes into rotating keys, managing encryption standards, and all of these things that allow you to focus on it. But absolutely, the cloud is secure by default. EJ, I don't know if you wanted to add to that.
I would add one other thing to that, Brian, with some of the things that we did, because I would have said kind of what you said, but the other thing I would talk about is it allows us to have a lot of micro-segmentation as well. So we have direct connections that control the app to just that app database, and you cannot communicate across unless we were to let that happen. So we have complete east-west protection in our cloud environment as well. So it's actually a really nice model for us in terms of not just a north-south, but an east-west protection. And we have that complete micro-segmentation in there.
Good thoughts. Well, that kind of leads me to what security takeaways would each of you like the audience to be aware of? And I'll start that with Drew.
All right. So I think Brian and EJ have had some fantastic comments, especially around developing out a security team and even talking about FedRAMP and a lot of the secure technologies that go into securing the cloud. A couple of things that I do think would help are make sure you know your framework and your risk that's associated for a lot of your organizations. Defining out what's the most risky is the most important, because that's what you're going to be able to target first. And then use the technologies that you need to help reduce that risk. You don't necessarily need to buy the entire security portfolio, because security is limitless as far as price points go. Finding that key value for that particular solution or even practice is going to be crucial to reducing that risk. Cisco has a lot of them as well, from a FedRAMP stamp, WebEx Teams, as well as Duo and CloudLock, and even App Dynamics is in there on the FedRAMP space. So I think there's a lot of potential and opportunity there to utilize best technologies for the best risk reduction for a lot of organizations.
Yeah. EJ, your thoughts?
So I would come at this from the cost point of view, being that that's one of the things I get hit by a lot as a government agency. And I would say you have to secure the data to what that is, and don't be afraid to challenge what that conventional wisdom is. Drew and Brian are talking about tools that are at your disposal. You have the ability to make those right decisions. As I mentioned, Oakland County only puts restricted data in GovCloud. There's a price reduction for us putting everything else into commercial cloud. And we went boldly at GovCloud with criminal justice information with some help from AWS and how we went forward. But we have an approved CJIS environment for the state of Michigan. And we've got that architecture actually vetted and approved with the help of what that is. And that helped us move some workloads off-prem to help reduce cost. But it also allows me to have that differentiation to give me the freedom of where to plug that data. So knowing your data and what it means to secure it is essential to building the right cost model for you as you go to cloud.
Cool. Brian, your thoughts?
So again, EJ's just used a phrase that I love, which is go boldly. And I think that if we look at the success that Oakland County has had, it's proven time and time again that in a cloud migration, like, speed disproportionately matters, right? You want to get started early. You want to get started testing. You want to start learning as quickly as possible. And and earlier I mentioned the shared responsibility model for AWS security. When it comes to evaluating the benefits of cloud computing over on-prem infrastructure, government customers all understand that when IT systems remain on-premise, they're going to be missing out on the benefits that come with that shared responsibility model. Legacy systems are going to require customers to manually execute patching and security updates. And if agencies fall behind in addressing these issues, they will become increasingly vulnerable to breaches, ransomware, and other cyber attacks. Those aren't unique to the cloud. As EJ mentioned right at the beginning of the call, those happen everywhere. But modernizing cloud-native solutions for government customers include enhanced monitoring capabilities, the network segmentation that EJ mentioned, and even FIPS 140-2 compliant encryption controls. So I would say don't be afraid, get started early, understand what the cloud can bring to you in terms of this getting rid of the undifferentiated heavy lifting that is a drag on your innovation and your modernization, and begin testing right away.
Cool. I see we have a question here about someone's asking about how to automate and what to automate in routine cloud security administrative tasks. What advice would you have for folks? Because I know as a CIO at both the state and the city level, just how much effort my staff had to put into all that background administrative work to make all this work and just function day in and day out was tremendous strain on their time when they could be applying their skills to other things. So what do you guys have in the way of thoughts for folks on that?
So I think that I would recommend that every customer, regardless of segment, try to automate as much as they can. I think it's important that we're clear that there is no software substitute for good judgment. But again, automation is going to allow you to prioritize that manual work effectively. And again, help your team avoid that alert fatigue. So one of the unique things that come with the cloud is, you're really now you're driving infrastructure as code. And that means you can interact with your infrastructure programmatically. And when you can interact with something programmatically, that means you should. So you can use services like AWS config and things like that to prevent against configuration drift in case anything falls out of compliance. But also there are automated checks and for security and privacy services like Amazon Guard Duty, Amazon Macy, Amazon Inspector, and Amazon Detective. All of those services, by the way, are approved for either FedRAMP Moderate or FedRAMP High baselines.
And if I could add to that, Otto, I think Brian has a really good point around programmability and especially the openness of API. I know AWS has a ton of open APIs on all of their products. And I think a lot of gurus and people that have been in networking and systems admin for a long time have kind of wearied and kind of shied away from learning a programming language or really diving into the development side of software design. And I think that's going to be a need going forward. In the next 20 years, everything's going to be controlled via API. The CLI is still going to be there, but we're going to see even more and more automation. So making sure you know how to train and increase your programmability knowledge is always important. I know Cisco DevNet is a good place to start. Even just learning a programming language like Python is phenomenal. And it makes such a big difference in how easy you can automate some of these tasks.
Yeah, great advice. Well, I want to be respectful of our time commitment today, folks, so we're going to have to wrap it up here. First of all, I want to thank Drew, Brian, EJ for your great insights on this topic. And I'd also like to thank our sponsors, Strategic Communications and Cisco, for making it possible for us to have this discussion today. And I'd also, of course, want to thank our audience for spending their time with us today. We look forward to seeing you again at another event by Government Technology. Take care, everyone, and stay safe.